Have you ever noticed the shadow that accompanies you from the moment of your first breath? The silent companion that follows your every step, unseen yet always present. We spend our lives pretending it isn't there, crafting elaborate distractions and constructing monuments to permanence. But what if I told you that acknowledging this shadow, embracing it even, might be the very key to truly living? From the instant we are born, we begin to die. Each heartbeat carries us forward on a journey that has only one destination. This isn't morbid thinking. It's perhaps the most profound truth of our existence. And yet, how desperately we resist, and how completely we turn away from this fundamental reality, building our lives around the unspoken fantasy of immortality. In my decades of research into near-death experiences, I've witnessed something remarkable. Those who have stood at the threshold between worlds and returned often share a curious liberation. They no longer fear death with the same gripping intensity. Instead, they embrace life with newfound appreciation, authenticity, and presence. What if we could access this wisdom without having to come so close to the edge? Consider for a moment how we live our days. We postpone joy. We delay meaningful conversations. We accumulate possessions as if we'll carry them beyond the grave. We harbor grudges as if we have endless tomorrows to reconcile. We chase achievements that will be forgotten within a generation, all while the clock ticks relentlessly forward. But what those who have glimpsed beyond tell us is revelatory. When the veil of immortality drops, what remains are not the accolades or acquisition. What matters are the connections made, the love given, the presence fully inhabited in ordinary moments. The simplicity of this wisdom is both startling and beautiful. The ancient Stoics practiced memento mori, remember that you will die, not as a macabre obsession but as a clarifying lens through which to view life. By bringing death into conscious awareness, they found greater meaning in each passing day. What if the awareness of your mortality isn't a burden to bear, but a gift to unwrap? In the softened light of finitude, petty concerns often dissolve. The argument with a loved one loses its sting when placed against the backdrop of limited time. The pursuit of status seems hollow when we acknowledge that all recognition eventually fades. Even our most cherished identities, our roles, titles, and carefully crafted self-images, reveal themselves as temporary costumes worn for a brief performance. The paradox that those who have returned from the edge often describe is this: accepting. The reality of death doesn't diminish life, it magnifies it. Colors become more vivid, relationships gain depth, ordinary moments take on extraordinary significance. What was once background music becomes a symphony deserving full attention. There's a particular quality to the smile of someone who has made peace with their mortality. It carries a gentle knowing, an embracing warmth that acknowledges the fragility of our shared condition. These individuals often speak of feeling more fully alive than before their brush with death. How curious that coming face to face with our end can be the beginning of truly living. What would change for you if you allowed yourself to fully absorb the truth that you are already dying? Not in some distant abstract future, but right now, with each passing moment. How might your priorities shift? Which conversations would you no longer postpone? What forgiveness might you offer that you've been withholding? What joy might you stop deferring until some imagined perfect time? The resistance you feel rising within you as you consider these questions, that tightening in your chest, that urge to close this mental door and return to comfortable illusions, that is the ego's desperate clinging to the fantasy of permanence. That resistance itself is worth examining with gentle curiosity. We are not taught how to die in our culture. We are taught instead how to deny death, how to push it away, medicalize it, institutionalize it, anything to keep it at arm's length. Yet in older traditions and wisdom practices, preparing for death was considered an essential part of living well. The art of dying was seen as inseparable from the art of living. As someone who has sat with thousands of individuals recounting their journeys to the threshold and back, I've observed a common thread. Those who resist the reality of death often experience it with greater fear and regret. Those who have made space for this unavoidable truth tend to approach their final transition with remarkable equanimity, even curiosity. What if the anxiety you feel about death isn't actually about death itself, but about unlived life? What if the fear stems not from ending, but from never having fully begun? The testimonies of those who have glimpsed beyond suggest that our deepest regrets center not on what we did, but on what we left unexpressed, unexperienced, unloved. Consider the possibility that you have been carrying an invisible burden, the exhausting weight of denial, the constant energy required to maintain the illusion of permanence. What might it feel like to set down that weight? What spaces might open within you if you allowed the truth of your mortality to fully land? There is a subtle but profound difference between a life lived in avoidance of death and one lived in awareness of it. The former tends toward accumulation, control, and the perpetual postponement of authentic living. The latter gravitates toward presence, appreciation, and the courage to love, knowing that all we cherish will eventually be lost to us, at least in the forms we currently know. What keeps us trapped in this silent denial of our own transience? Perhaps it's the illusion of permanence that we've collectively constructed. We build cities as if they'll stand forever. We establish institutions meant to outlast us by centuries. We even speak of legacy as if the ripples of our existence might somehow defy the ultimate dissolution that awaits all things. There is both beauty and tragedy in this human tendency, the aspiration toward the eternal juxtaposed against the inescapable reality of impermanence. This illusion of permanence doesn't just shape our world, it shapes our very sense of self. The ego, that collection of identifications and stories we mistake for our essence, depends entirely on the fantasy of continuity. It requires the belief that tomorrow will arrive, and that when it does, we will still be essentially the same person we are today. The ego cannot, by its very nature, comprehend its own ending, and so it constructs elaborate defenses against this uncomfortable truth. Chief among them, the simple act of refusing to look. Those who have experienced clinical death and returned often describe a profound shift in their relationship to ego. They speak of witnessing their life, their very identity, from a vantage point beyond personal concern. They describe a loosening of the boundaries they once held so tightly. Boundaries between self and other, between life and death, between being and non-being. What remains is not the dissolution of identity, but rather its expansion into something more spacious, more inclusive, less defended. Consider how differently you might live if you fully embraced that you are already in the process of dying. How? Would your conversations change? Would you still leave so many things unsaid? Would you still postpone joy, connection, forgiveness, and wonder? Or would the precious nature of your dwindling time bring an urgency to living fully, loving openly, and releasing what no longer serves the brief journey you're on? We experience small deaths constantly throughout our lives. The child you once were has already died, replaced by the adult you've become. Dreams and aspirations have died, making way for new ones to emerge. Relationships have ended. Beliefs have transformed. Versions of ourselves have fallen away. We are already intimate with loss and transformation, whether we recognize it or not. The final transition may be less foreign than we imagine. The most common insight reported by those who've returned from death's threshold is a complete reordering of values. Material success, social status, and external validation, the very metrics by which most of us navigate our daily lives, suddenly appear hollow, even meaningless. What emerges instead is the supreme importance of love, of presence, of the courageous authenticity that becomes possible when we stop organizing our lives around the fear of an ending we cannot escape. The ego constructs countless strategies to avoid confronting mortality. We immerse ourselves in busyness, in constant productivity, as if we might outrun death through sheer activity. We pursue immortality projects, creating art, building businesses, establishing foundations, having children, hoping that something of us might continue beyond our biological end. We follow spiritual paths promising eternal life in other realms, and perhaps most commonly we simply don't think about it. We push awareness of death to the periphery of consciousness, acknowledging it in the abstract while maintaining the emotional fiction that it applies to others, but somehow not to us. All these strategies share a common thread. They allow us to avoid being fully present with the magnificent vulnerability of being alive right now, in bodies that are already in the process of returning to the elements from which they came. What if, Instead of turning away, we turn toward this reality with open eyes and an open heart. What if we allowed the truth of our finite nature to permeate our days, not as a morbid obsession, but as a clarifying presence? Those who have glimpsed beyond report that there is profound peace available in this acceptance. Not resignation, but a vibrant peace that infuses each moment with heightened significance. The paradox at the heart of human existence is that by acknowledging our death, we become more fully alive. By releasing the exhausting pretense of permanence, we free up enormous energy for the art of living. By recognizing the temporal nature of all that we experience, we develop a more intimate, appreciative relationship with the passing beauty of our days. Consider the Japanese tradition of wabi-sabi, which finds beauty precisely in impermanence, in the patina that time leaves upon all things. A cherry blossom is considered most beautiful not in the perfection of full bloom, but in the exquisite vulnerability of its petals beginning to fall. What if we viewed our own lives through this lens? What beauty might we discover in our own ephemeral nature? When we deny death, we don't actually enhance life. We diminish it. We flatten the rich topography of existence into a desperate pursuit of more time, rather than more depth. We exchange the vertigo of fully acknowledging our temporal nature for the numbing comfort of distraction. We trade the possibility of a life infused with the bittersweetness of transience for the illusion of safety within our carefully constructed narratives. Those who work with the dying often speak of the radical honesty that emerges in life's final chapter. Pretenses fall away. Social masks become irrelevant. What matters crystallizes with startling clarity. Yet why should this wisdom be available only at life's end? What prevents us from living with this clarity now, in the midst of our days? Perhaps our resistance to acknowledging death isn't really about death at all. Perhaps it's about the intensity of being fully alive, an intensity that can feel overwhelming, even unbearable, to an ego accustomed to the numbing comfort of routine and distraction. To be fully present to the reality that this exact moment, these precise sensations, these particular relationships are fleeting and will never come again exactly this way. That awareness carries both exquisite sweetness and a kind of pain. A pain not of suffering, but of raw openness to life's staggering beauty and brevity. In the narratives of those who've experienced clinical death, there is often a description of moving beyond linear time, of experiencing past, present, and future simultaneously. In this expanded state, they report that the meaning of their life becomes apparent not in its duration, but in its depth, not in its accomplishments, but in its quality of presence and love. What if we allowed this wisdom to inform our living, now rather than waiting for the final transition to reveal what matters most? Our relationship with time undergoes a profound transformation when we acknowledge our mortality. In ordinary consciousness, time is experienced as a linear progression, an invisible current carrying us from past to future. We perceive it as an external force, something happening to us, rather than an intimate dimension of our being. But those who have ventured to the threshold report something quite different, a spacious presence where time as we know it dissolves. Have you noticed how your perception of time shifts with your state of mind? In moments of fear, seconds stretch like hours. In joy, hours pass like seconds. In flow states, time seems to disappear altogether. This subjective experience hints at a deeper truth, that time is not merely an objective reality, but a quality of consciousness itself. The clock on the wall measures chronological time, the time of appointments, deadlines, and aging bodies. But there exists another kind of time, what we might call soul time. This is the time of meaningful moments, of insights that arrive in an instant, yet contain wisdom that unfolds for years. It's the timelessness we touch in profound connection, in creative expression, in the silent depths of meditation. This quality of time cannot be measured, only experienced. Those who have clinically died and returned often describe experiencing their entire lives in what seems like both an instant and an eternity. They report reviewing not just their actions, but the ripple effects of those actions, experienced from multiple perspectives simultaneously. In these expanded states, they discover that the meaning of their lives was never contained in the duration, but in the depth, not in how long they lived, but in how fully they loved. What if we could allow this wisdom to permeate our relationship with time while still embodied? What if, rather than constantly racing against the clock, we recognize that we are the clock, that time as we experience it is inseparable from our consciousness? This shift doesn't negate the practical reality of chronological time, but it places it within a larger context, one where each moment can be entered more fully. Consider your own relationship with time. How often do you find yourself rushing through the present moment to get to some imagined future where life will presumably be better? How much of your precious attention is consumed by replaying the past or rehearsing the future? What would change if you recognized that the only time you ever actually have is this present moment, that both past and future exist only as thoughts arising now? In hospice settings, where I've spent considerable time listening to those in their final days, a common theme emerges: the recognition that time spent worrying about the future was time not spent living. Many express that they spent decades postponing life for some tomorrow that either never arrived or arrived so differently than expected that their preparations proved irrelevant. What wisdom might we glean from these testimonies? The awareness of death brings the precious nature of time into sharp relief. When we truly absorb that our heartbeats are numbered, we naturally become more discerning about how we spend them. The trivial falls away. The essential comes into focus. We become less willing to sacrifice the present for a promised future that is never guaranteed. This doesn't mean abandoning responsibility or living only for immediate gratification. Rather, it means bringing greater consciousness to how we relate to time itself. It means recognizing the difference between genuine preparation for the future and the anxious planning that often serves primarily to avoid being fully present now. It means distinguishing between worthy long-term investments of our energy and the endless deferral of joy that characterizes so many lives. Near-death experiencers often describe encountering a timeless dimension where past, present, and future appear as aspects of a unified whole rather than separate points on a line. They speak of accessing a vantage point beyond their ordinary identity, where the entire tapestry of their life becomes visible at once. From this expanded perspective, they report seeing patterns and connections previously hidden by the sequential nature of ordinary time. What's particularly striking in these accounts is the consistent emphasis on love as the ultimate measure of a life well lived. Not love as an emotion only, but love as a quality of presence, as undivided attention, as recognition of the sacred in the ordinary. When all the external trappings of success and failure fall away, when the carefully constructed narratives of the ego dissolve, what remains is the simple truth of how we've attended to each other, to ourselves, to the mystery of being here at all. Consider for a moment what you've been postponing. What conversations have you delayed? What dreams have you deferred? What healing have you put off until some more convenient season? If you knew with absolute certainty that you had 1 year remaining, how would your priorities shift? What would fall away as suddenly irrelevant? What would emerge as essential? This isn't a morbid exercise, but a clarifying one. It doesn't diminish life, but intensifies it. By bringing death into conscious awareness, we strip away the non-essential and reveal what matters most. We recover the ability to marvel at the sheer miracle of existence, the statistical impossibility of being here at all, in this body, at this time, with these particular people, facing these specific challenges and opportunities. The ancient traditions speak of memento mori, remember that you will die, not as a dark obsession but as a practice of liberation. By keeping death as an advisor, we develop immunity to trivial concerns. We become less susceptible to social pressure, to the infectious anxieties of the collective, to the endless distractions dangled before us by a culture uncomfortable with depth and silence. Those who have glimpsed beyond often return with a profound sense of purpose, not necessarily a specific mission but a general orientation toward bringing more presence, more compassion, more consciousness into each interaction. They describe feeling as if they've been granted a second chance, not to accomplish more, but to be more fully available to life as it unfolds. What would it mean for you to live as if you'd been granted such a second chance? How would you approach this very day if you recognized it as the gift it is? A day that was never guaranteed, a collection of moments that will never come again in exactly this way. How might you move through your hours with the heightened appreciation that comes from knowing none of this is permanent, that everything you cherish is already in the process of changing, of passing away? Time is not just passing for you. You are time. Your consciousness, your body, your relationships are temporal events, processes unfolding. To be human is to be time-bound, and in that limitation lies an invitation to presence that the eternal might never know. Perhaps this is why, in the accounts of those who have died and returned, there is often a profound gratitude for the opportunity to once again experience the exquisite limitations of embodied life. When we truly begin to integrate the awareness of our mortality, a profound alchemy takes place. Our priorities undergo a natural refinement. Values clarify themselves without effort. The question, does this matter in light of my finite time, becomes a compass guiding us toward what is essential and away from what merely distracts or numbs. This isn't a morbid obsession, but rather a loving attention to the preciousness of each irreplaceable moment. Those who have returned from death's threshold consistently report a transformation in how they relate to life's challenges. Difficulties that once seemed overwhelming are placed in a larger context. The perspective gained from confronting mortality allows them to ask, will this matter when I'm taking my final breath? Most often, the answer is no. What persists as meaningful are relationships, moments of connection, experiences of beauty and wonder, opportunities to grow in love and wisdom. Consider the metaphor of death as a mirror that reflects the true nature of our living. When we stand before this mirror, stripped of pretense and distraction, what do we see? Are we living in alignment with what we know matters most? Are we expressing the love we feel? Are we using our unique gifts in service to something larger than our individual concerns? Are we present to the miracle of ordinary existence? The feeling of sun on skin, the sound of rain on leaves, the sacred exchange of being seen and heard by another human being. In my decades of research, I've been struck by how consistently those who've glimpsed beyond return with a profound gratitude for the simple fact of being alive. They no longer take for granted the everyday miracles, breathing, seeing, touching, loving. They develop an almost childlike appreciation for experiences that most of us have learned to overlook in our rush towards some imagined better future. What if we didn't need a brush with death to access this wisdom? What if we could metabolize it now, allowing it to transform how we move through our days? The path is simple, though not easy. It requires only that we periodically turn toward rather than away from the truth of our mortality, that we allow death to be not just an intellectual concept, but an embodied knowing that informs our choices. Consider how you might live differently if you fully absorb that this exact day will never come again, that the particular configuration of relationships, opportunities, challenges, and beauty available to you right now is utterly unique and unrepeatable. How would you approach the conversation with a loved one, the work task before you, even the mundane activities of maintaining your life? What quality of attention might you bring to each moment if you recognized its irreplaceable nature? The transformation that occurs when we integrate awareness of our mortality isn't merely psychological. It ripples through every dimension of our being. Those who have returned from death's edge often describe a reorganization of their energy, their priorities, even their physical sensations. They frequently report heightened appreciation for sensory experience, as if tasting food, feeling textures, or witnessing natural beauty for the first time. The world becomes more vivid, more immediate, more worthy of their full attention. This heightened aliveness isn't just a subjective experience. It manifests in tangible ways, in greater courage to express authentic feelings, in reduced attachment to external validation, in increased willingness to take meaningful risks in service to what matters most. When the illusion of unlimited time dissolves, we become less willing to defer joy, connection, creativity, and purpose to some imagined future that is never guaranteed. The traditions of the world offer various practices for cultivating this awareness. The Tibetan Buddhists engage in meditations on impermanence and death, not from morbid fascination, but as a path to greater appreciation and presence. The Mexican holiday, Dia de los Muertos, creates a collective ritual where death is not hidden away but brought into the center of community life. honored with color, food, and celebration. Indigenous wisdom traditions around the world incorporate awareness of mortality into their ceremonies and daily practices, recognizing that a life conscious of its own finitude is a life more fully inhabited. What might your own practice look like? Perhaps it's as simple as taking a few moments each morning to acknowledge that this day is both a gift and a limited resource. Perhaps it's reflecting periodically on what you would regret leaving unexpressed, uncreated, unresolved if your time were to end unexpectedly. Perhaps it's the practice of saying "I love you" without reservation, of expressing appreciation without delay, of noticing beauty without taking it for granted. The irony is that by turning toward rather than away from our mortality, we don't diminish our lives but expand them. We don't become morbid but more vibrantly alive. The awareness that everything is temporary, our relationships, our achievements, our struggles, even our most cherished identities, doesn't lead to nihilism, but to a profound appreciation for the dance of existence in which we're momentarily participating. Those who study near-death experiences often note a common theme, the description of a life review in which individuals perceive not just their actions, but the ripple effects of those actions, experienced from multiple perspectives simultaneously. What's striking about these accounts is that the review doesn't seem punitive, but revelatory. The central questions aren't about external achievements, but about the quality of presence brought to each moment, the love expressed or withheld, the growth in wisdom and compassion throughout the journey. If such a review awaits each of us, what insights might it reveal about how you're living now? How might you move through your days differently if you imagined experiencing their impact not just from your limited perspective, but from the vantage point of all those affected by your presence, your choices, your way of being in the world? There is a fundamental liberation that comes from making peace with mortality. The energy once spent in denial becomes available for living. The anxiety that accompanies the pretense of permanence dissolves into a more grounded relationship with reality. Even the ego, that collection of strategies designed to protect us from feeling our vulnerability, can relax its vigilant defense when death is acknowledged not as an enemy to be feared, but as an integral part of the life cycle. This isn't about romanticizing death or denying the grief that accompanies loss. It's about recognizing that our avoidance of this essential truth doesn't actually protect us. It diminishes us. It keeps us skimming the surface of life rather than diving into its depths. It has us chasing security rather than embracing the magnificent vulnerability that is our birthright as temporal beings. The mystics and poets have long recognized what modern near-death research now confirms, that there is a quality of being alive that transcends the duration of a life. Whether we live to be 20 or 100, the invitation remains the same: to bring our full presence to the time we have, to love without reservation, to allow ourselves to be changed by the inevitable losses and gains that constitute a human journey. Consider the possibility that you've been given not just life but death as well, and that both are necessary for the wholeness of your experience. Consider that your mortality isn't a design flaw but an essential element of what makes your time here meaningful. Consider that the brevity of your journey isn't a tragedy but the very condition that makes love, beauty, connection, and growth so achingly precious. What would it mean to dance with death rather than flee from it? To recognize it not as an adversary, but as a partner in the choreography of existence? Those who have returned from the threshold often speak of a profound shift in how they relate to their finite nature. Rather than seeing death as an unwelcome intruder, they come to recognize it as an intimate companion that has been with them all along, not threatening life, but defining it, giving it shape, depth, and meaning. Consider for a moment how a sunset derives its poignancy from its transience. Would we gather to witness this daily miracle if it lasted forever? Would we pause and wonder at the changing colors of autumn leaves if they maintain their vibrant hues indefinitely? There is a particular quality of appreciation that becomes available only when we recognize that what we're experiencing is temporary, that this exact configuration of elements will never come again in precisely this way. The same holds true for our lives. When we push away awareness of our mortality, we don't enhance our experience. We flatten. We exchange the rich dimensionality of a life conscious of its boundaries for the illusory comfort of imagined permanence. We trade depth for duration, presence for denial, the exquisite vulnerability of being fully alive for the numbing safety of abstraction. Near-death experiencers frequently report a sensation of extraordinary lightness and freedom. Many describe feeling released from the weight of social expectations, from attachment to material possessions, from anxiety about status and achievement. What they discover beyond the threshold is not the cessation of existence, but its expansion. A sense of belonging to something larger than their individual identity, something that transcends the particular form their consciousness currently inhabits. What's remarkable is that this freedom isn't conditional on actually dying. It's available now to those willing to acknowledge and integrate the reality of their mortality. The liberation comes not from escaping death, but from ceasing to escape from the awareness of it. When we stop expending energy on denial, that energy becomes available for living with greater presence, authenticity, and love. Think of a time when you've been fully absorbed in the present moment, perhaps in creative expression, in communion with nature, in intimate connection with another, or in the flow state that accompanies meaningful work. In such moments, the usual boundaries of self can soften. The constant narration of past and future that normally occupies our minds grows quiet. We experience a quality of presence that transcends our ordinary preoccupation. This state bears striking similarities to what those who've glimpsed beyond death describe, a spacious awareness where the small self with its concerns and defenses recedes, and a larger, more encompassing perspective emerges. What if this state, this presence, this freedom from the constrictions of ego, is our birthright? What if it's constantly available but obscured by our habitual patterns of thinking, feeling, and perceiving? What if the very resistance that keeps us from acknowledging our mortality also keeps us from accessing the profound aliveness that lies just beneath the surface of our ordinary consciousness? Those who study consciousness at life's thresholds often observe that as physical systems begin to shut down, something else appears to open up. There are countless accounts of terminal lucidity, where individuals with severe dementia or brain damage experience remarkable clarity in their final hours or days. There are well-documented cases of expanded awareness occurring precisely when the brain's activity is diminishing. These phenomena hint at the possibility that consciousness may be more than simply the product of neurological processes, that perhaps our physical embodiment both enables and constrains our experience in ways we're only beginning to understand. Whether or not consciousness continues beyond bodily death, a question that remains open despite thousands of compelling accounts from those who've temporarily crossed the threshold. There is wisdom to be gained from contemplating the mystery. The very fact that we don't know with absolute certainty what happens at death invites a humble relationship with existence, an openness to possibilities beyond our current understanding, a willingness to inhabit the questions rather than clinging to answers too small for the magnitude of the mystery we're part of. This humility in the face of the unknown is itself a liberation. When we acknowledge the limits of our understanding, we create space for wonder, for reverence, for the recognition that we are participating in something far greater than what our individual minds can comprehend. This recognition doesn't diminish our humanity. It contextualizes it within a larger whole, allowing us to hold both our uniqueness and our belonging with equal appreciation. Consider how differently you might approach your relationships if you held the awareness that neither you nor those you love are permanent fixtures in each other's lives. How might your expressions of appreciation, your resolutions of conflict, your willingness to be vulnerable shift if you recognize the temporary nature of every connection? Not in a way that devalues those connections, but in a way that infuses them with the poignancy that comes from acknowledging their preciousness, precisely because they will not last forever in their current form. Near-death experiencers consistently report that at the end of life, the questions that matter are beautifully simple. Did you love well? Did you learn and grow from your experiences? Did you find and express your unique gifts? Were you present to the miracle of your own existence? These are not questions about achievement or acquisition, but about the quality of attention brought to the fundamental fact of being alive. What would it mean to orient your life around these questions now, rather than waiting for them to emerge in your final moments? How might your days unfold differently if you evaluated your choices not by external metrics of success, but by their alignment with what you know matters most: presence, connection, growth, contribution, love. The paradox at the heart of this contemplation is that by embracing the reality of death, we don't diminish life, we magnify. By acknowledging the temporary nature of our existence, we don't reduce its significance, we enhance it. By recognizing that we are already in the process of dying, we free ourselves to be more fully alive in each precious moment we're given. This isn't about adopting a particular belief system or adhering to a specific spiritual framework. It's about allowing the simple truth of your finite nature to permeate your awareness, not as a dark cloud, but as a clarifying presence that strips away the non-essential and reveals what matters most. It's about recognizing that the preciousness of life doesn't depend on its duration, but on its depth, on the quality of presence, love, and meaning we bring to however many or few days we're granted. There is extraordinary freedom in this recognition. Freedom from the exhausting pretense of permanence, from the desperate accumulation of status and possessions, from the postponement of authentic living until some imagined perfect future. When we embrace our mortality, we're released into the only moment we ever actually have. This one, right now, with all its complexity, beauty, challenge, and opportunity. And so I invite you to consider, what if the awareness of your mortality isn't something to push away, but something to draw close, not as a morbid obsession, but as a wise companion on your journey? What if death isn't the opposite of life, but an integral part of it, the necessary boundary that gives it shape, meaning, and poignancy? What if you are already dying, have been since the moment of your birth, and this recognition, far from being a burden, is the very key to living with greater presence, authenticity, and love? For in the end, perhaps the greatest wisdom isn't found in transcending death, but in fully embracing the magnificent vulnerability of being alive, of participating, for this brief and precious time, in the eternal dance of form and formlessness, of coming together and falling away, of love that transcends the particular vessels it temporarily inhabits. Perhaps the most profound liberation comes not from escaping our mortality, but from allowing it to teach us how to live. With open hands, an open mind, and an open heart, receiving each moment as the unrepeatable gift that it is.